Welcome to the Cyber Business Podcast, where we feature top founders and entrepreneurs and share their inspiring stories. Now, let's get started with the show.
Matthew Connor here, host of the Cyber Business Podcast, where we feature successful business leaders, authors, top law firms, green energy companies, and more. Today, we are joined by the author of Relentless Sales, great book, Jon Alwinson. Jon, welcome to the show.
Matt, thanks for having me.
A pleasure. This episode is brought to you by cyberlinks.com. That's cyberlynx.com. Do you know if a hacker's in your system? Most people and most companies don't until it's too late and the hacker's already done damage. A hacker's job is to bypass your security, so companies need a way of knowing when someone's gotten past their security. That's where CyberLink's intrusion detection comes in. With our 24/7 security operations center, we monitor your computers, networks, and cloud accounts using a combination of AI and highly skilled cybersecurity technicians to detect any signs of attack or intrusion. So if a bad guy gets past your security, we'll know right away and be able to kick him out. Find out more at cyberlinks.com. That's cyberlynx.com. And now back to our show. Jon, I got to tell you, I finished reading your book last night. It's a great read, really easy to digest. It's kind of a fast read, which I appreciated. It was fantastic, filled with good stuff. But can you tell me what was the inspiration?
Yeah, so I think ultimately this is the book I wish I had when I started 15 years ago, and so this is my way of giving back to that next generation of sellers and helping them along the way. And so this is accumulation of 15 years of reading multiple sales books per year and just kind of putting it all together for that next generation.
I love it. And I think some of the best books, I love that kind of Tony Robbins approach of you collect a bunch of great information, distill it down into what makes sense for you and relay that to other people. Dale Carnegie was the same. There's a lot of really great examples of that. And I think you do an excellent job in here of doing that. And I think you can kind of tell your perspective of being that, you're a very successful sales manager who's now helping the next generation, all of these ideas. So speaking of that, you talk a lot about mentorship in your book. Can you, for those who have yet to read it, but hopefully everybody does read it because it's a great book, can you kind of walk us through your perspective on mentorship?
Yeah, I was very fortunate growing up. I had a dad who knew nothing about business, was a Presbyterian minister, but knew a lot of business people. And so I was able to tap into my dad's network growing up. And he would say, Johnny, after church, this guy is a successful entrepreneur. He's got a multi-million-dollar organization. Go ask him to coffee. And if you can set up a lunch, he's like, I'll pay for it. And so that was my dad's way of saying, hey, I know nothing about business, but I want to help you out. And so I had this huge pool of successful people in the Orlando market that, I would go up to and talk to based off my dad's relationships. And it was awesome, man. And I've learned so much. And I had a mentor I talk about in chapter 1 that really helped me get into medical device sales after the entrepreneur venture that I started. And I think mentors make all the difference in the world.
Well, I couldn't agree more. And I want to dive further into that. But first, I want to go back because you mentioned that so at an early age, did you know that you wanted to get into business?
So I think my dad and mom never knew what to do with me. They knew I had people skills, but my dad was in ministry. My mom was a stay-at-home mom. And they're like, we don't know. We know my older brother, is going to be a CEO someday. We have no idea what we're going to do with Johnny. Right. And so I think they just didn't know what to do with me. And they just started introducing me to different people and hoping I'd kind of figure it out along the way.
Well, I think first of all, I think that's genius, not just for a kid that you're not sure what they're going to do, but I think for all people everywhere. I think all too often we see in this country this idea that you can be a self-made man or self-made person, which I think is complete horse crap, because there's just no way. You can't make a book on your own. Are you kidding me? How did you make the paper? How did you make the ink? How did you get the glue to bind it together? How did you? Are you kidding me? Thousands of people went into creating all the stuff that was needed for you to do that. Not to mention the computer that you wrote it on and all. Now we're talking about millions of people involved in developing them. So nobody makes anything on their own. Right. So for your parents to then be like, hey, look, the really important part of life and success is people, and to cultivate that in you and help you at an early age, that's just brilliant. That's just good
Yeah.
parenting.
Yeah, and I think every parent should do that, right? I think I'm trying to do that already with my young kids and get them around people that we think can help them down the road.
100%. So in your book, you really focus on helping people learn those lessons. And
Mhm.
in terms of mentorship, kind of getting back to that mentorship issue or topic, what advice would you give somebody? I mean, you got a young kid, they're fresh out of school, whether it's high school or college, and they're like, I don't know where to start. And they probably aren't even that familiar with the idea of mentorship. What perspective should they have, and what advice would you give them?
It's funny, right before this call, a guy that read the book reached out to me, younger guy, and he's just hungry and asked me the same questions, right? He's not even a year into sales. And he said mentors really, chapter one stood out to him. And he was just digging, asking about the book, what advice I would give him. First, patience, right? Especially if you're a really hungry individual. Be patient. Like this guy I just talked to, literally been in sales less than a year. I mean, he's in the practice phase, right, where he's building his skills. And so, for those that need to hear the word patience, be patient, right? But we talk about building a board of directors for your life, and he and I were talking about that really specifically. I asked him about his background with his parents, like what's your relationship with your parents, and he shared that with me, and I think that helped me kind of guide him on where he should go. But he identified a few people right off the call that really he should start reaching out to. And I think make it informal. But if you want to be developed by others, usually people that are a few years down the road from you, they, number one, they want to help you out, right?
Yeah.
People love helping other people out. And so I think just be bold and ask those who are kind of where you want to be someday, can we grab coffee? Can we grab lunch? Right. And then start building your board of directors for your life.
Now, first of all, I love that concept, and maybe you know it's a known thing. It was pretty new to me. I mean, I thought it was a great idea. So this board of directors for your life, and you take a really great approach to it. Can you explain that to people? What you
Yeah,
mean
I
by that?
think, yeah, what I mean by that is I think find, 3 to 5 people who are where you want to be someday or are a little bit more advanced than you, and put them on a short list to where you catch up with them either on a quarterly basis. Make it informal, don't make it overly formal. But have create a Word document with board of directors for my life and write their names down and track how many times you're meeting with them throughout the year and things that you're learning. And what you'll find out is the growth that you'll experience from being around those individuals. It'll just catapult your career. So start a informal board of directors for your life.
Yeah, and I think that's so important. First of all, the informal part, and
Yeah.
you also stress that about the mentorship. I think a lot of people think that the formalized mentorship, and you do a great job of talking about that in the book and being like, yeah, you're gonna scare people off. Nobody
It's
really wants
weird.
the. It's
Yeah.
weird. It's weird
Yeah.
for everybody involved. But
Yeah.
your approach to it is like, go have coffee, pick their brain, and I think the great part about that is it's that whole, show me your 5 closest friends, I'll show you your future type thing.
Yes.
And if you're picking a board, those basically become friends, and now you're leveling up your friends. And I don't necessarily think you need to get rid of all your friends, although for some people they do,
Right.
and they should. But I
Yeah.
think that's it ties into really smart advice in such a practical way. So
Mm.
I think that's a really great idea. Did
Yeah.
you come up with that, or how'd that come to be?
So my dad, who we call Chief in the book, we call him Chief. He really created that idea concept. I don't know if he created it or not, but he's the one that passed it along to me. So we picked that up from Chief, and I wish I would have done it when I first graduated college. It took me a while to really get into it. But the sooner you can adopt that mentality, like you said, the 5 closest people around you, there really is truth to that. The 5 closest people around you will really show you where you're going to be someday in your life.
Really does, for a lot of reasons. And so that board is just brilliant. I mean, your
Yeah.
dad was onto some stuff. I mean, for being
Yeah.
you know,
A
for
non-business guy,
a
right?
non-business guy, he was deep in it. That was
Yeah.
great.
Yeah.
Okay. so this ties in nicely into this kind of idea of, you'd mentioned, right out of college, and you tell the story of what happened right out of college. So if you wouldn't mind, I'd love to hear the story, kind of straight from the horse's mouth,
Yeah.
because it is a good story. I think people should hear it, because it leads to so many other things. So if you would.
Yeah. So during college, my older brother Joel, who is a serial entrepreneur now, has multiple businesses, very successful out of Orlando, Florida. He and I, when my senior year of college, he's 2 years older than me. We started a outdoor footwear company. And so we raised capital. We started manufacturing shoes, sandals, boat shoes, camp mock shoes out of China. And we were selling those to retail stores when I graduated across the US. And at one point, we had about 150 retail stores across the US, kind of like the Bass Pro type stores, right? The outdoorsy stores. And we were kind of kicking on all cylinders. But as you can imagine, and we talk about in the book, we made every mistake in the book. And from overlapping job responsibilities to personally, my brother and I having strife between us, right? Because he wanted the business to go one way, I wanted the business to go another way. We both probably didn't know enough to be where we were. And ultimately the company failed, right? And I talk about that openly in the book. And the amount of adversity, the things I've learned about business and life through failing after about 5 years of giving it a go, I think really has led to where I am today. It's helped me create the toughness I need in sales. It's helped me create that relentless mentality. But yeah, I'm happy to go wherever you want with that. I'm an open book with that. But we screwed up in many ways, but we gave it our best and had good intentions with it.
Well, I think that you talk about it, and in the book, and you're kind of the benefits and the focus that people should have when it comes to failure.
Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I think redefining failure we talk about in Relentless, and I think we look at it like it's all or nothing, right? We think it's going to be forever, and it really isn't forever, right? You learn. It's an event. It's not forever, and I talk about even with my kids now. I want them pushing themselves, because if you're not trying big things, you're not pushing yourself enough, and so don't make fear feel like the boogeyman. It's not. It's an event. And what it creates in you is a stronger, more fortified, more relentless person than where you were before. And so I say go for it, be excellent, and don't let failure break you from trying things, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think it really needs to be refocused for
Mhm.
the younger generations, because you go through school, and I love how in the book you talk several times about being a product of the public school system, which is
Yeah.
funny and also true at the same time. And I think the interesting part is that we're teaching kids as they grow up to be perfect, get a perfect score, get, here's the information, learn it perfectly, regurgitate it perfectly. And then if you don't, well, that's a bad thing. We're not teaching them to push yourself, try new things, and experiment and fail. And I understand that's a hard one to do in a classroom environment. It takes a whole different kind of structure. But regardless, the effect on people as they spend 12 of the years going through an educational system is when they get to the end, they're like, there's a perfect way of doing things. I'm to be as perfect as possible in order to be successful, because we tell them that do great in
Mhm.
school, get a good job, succeed in life. If you don't do well in school, then how are you going to succeed? And so it's a real problem, right?
Yeah, I think the school system right now is training people to be workers, right? Rather than be entrepreneurs, be business owners. And we should be teaching things like personal finance, entrepreneurship. We should be having those kind of conversations for our kids growing up, because thinking for themselves, critically thinking outside of just getting an A on a test, right? It's life is so much more than how the public school system is shaping things right now. And I think it's a miss. I think we should be learning entrepreneurship.
100%. So let's dive in. So we kind of touched on the relentless part of the title,
Yeah.
in a way. Let's start diving into the sales part. I mean, I think this is the fun part for me. I love the whole sales process. I love everything about it. That's just me. I think a lot of entrepreneurs do. So let me leave this very open for you and take this wherever
Sure.
you want to go. But sales, what is your take on it? What's your advice on it?
Yeah, and there's so many aspects here. I think number one, there's one chapter I wrote called Relationships versus Everything. So number one, relationships. Make it about your customer and their goals. So the longer I'm in sales, the more I want to align myself to my customers' goals and just figure out like if our product, solution, or service really makes sense or not for them. And because sometimes you can sell it, and when we're earlier in our sales career, we just want to close, we just want to build a name for ourselves. But what we find is when we push, a square peg in a round hole, it usually causes more problems for us and our customers than had we just parted without doing business with one another. So make sure your service and solution is the right fit. And I think start with understanding what's important to your customer. What's their 6 month, 1 year, 5 year goal?
Yeah. I think I think that's often very overlooked. And I think you nailed it. People are just like, I want to sell ice to Eskimos. Okay, why? They have
Right.
ice.
Right.
I'd rather sell water to someone in the desert. They need the water. They'll be happy for it. They'll benefit from it.
Yeah.
Leave the ice to the Eskimos. They've got plenty. I don't want to be in that business. And I think it's easy for people to get confused there.
Yep, no doubt. Yeah, we got to make sure it's a good fit, mutual fit. And so a lot of times I'll call it out front, like, hey, I know we're here to talk about this, but before we get started, please, I would love to know what's important to you this year, what's on your hot plate. Figure out what their immediate goals are, because you're going to learn if your solution, product, or service is a good fit or not within their 6 month to year time frame.
Yeah. And you talk about it in the book. And I think it's so often overlooked, especially for young people. And I love that, this is kind of, geared towards those younger salespeople, but I think it's very applicable to salespeople everywhere, is that
Yeah.
the idea of just kind of slowing down and getting to know the client or the customer, the prospect's needs.
Mhm.
And really, because when you slow down in the beginning, you speed up in the end. So just take the time to
Right.
get to know them, what their needs are, what they're looking to do, and understand that and kind of dive in. And I think you talked about, I'm going to let you talk about this. So
Yeah.
what is your process? Because you go into it nicely
Yeah,
in the book.
yeah. So we lay out a process that starts with, and this is actually a mentor of mine that gave me this process, Todd Zog. But pre-call plan is the first step, right? So are you doing your research before you go into that meeting? A lot of salespeople, a lot of younger salespeople are, watching TV at night, watching Netflix, right? When they really should be pre-call planning, looking their customer up on their website, social media, etc. Like, do your research before you walk in there. Try to learn as much about your prospect as you can. So prepare, approach the customer with rapport. You don't have to make this a clunky thing. This sales process shouldn't be robotic. It should flow. But approach with rapport. Treat your customer like it's your best friend. Be professional, but treat your customer like they're a best friend of yours, right? And be very genuinely interested in them. So prepare, approach, identify pain. Approach the customer with rapport. Identify pain. Pain. At the end of the day, we could stop right here. Pain's the only thing that's going to either get your customer to buy from you or not. Is there pain right now with product, service, or solution? Yes or no? Because if there's no pain, you're not able to uncover that. You're really wasting your customer's time and you're wasting your time. And then don't just give them the life vest right away. Like, if there's pain there, poke the pain a little bit, right? Try to figure out why, because it's just smart, and understand why that pain is there, and then demonstrate value, advance the sale, close, and follow up, right? And I've used this whether I'm selling $500,000 piece of equipment or a $5 piece of equipment. It works regardless.
Yeah. And I think, it's kind of funny that the poke the pain, and it sounds a little kind of, I don't know, cruel or masochistic, if you
Sure,
will.
sure,
But
yeah.
I think the reality is, and well, that's a funny way of looking at it. Really, what you're telling people to do is to dig deeper and really understand the pain and what it is. Because they may be like, "Ooh, ow." They talk about like a little, the pain on their finger. Well, it's a paper cut. When you're treating it like they'd just gotten, their finger cut off,
Right.
you're not going to get that. So, because you don't understand the actual pain. You saw pain on the finger, you jump to, oh, let me tourniquet your finger to stop the
Yes.
bleeding. Be like, dude, it's a paper cut. I'm good. Right now, you look crazy, and you were
Right.
so quick to just jump to a solution that wasn't what they needed. Maybe just a little band-aid. You could have sold them a band-aid, but you tried to
Yeah.
sell a tourniquet, right?
We
So
get happy ears sometimes. We get happy ears as salespeople. We assume we know. And that's something I work with my team. We talk about that a little bit in the book, is like, don't assume you know. And the good thing, and part of being a product of the public school system, a lot of times, like, I'm not the smartest guy in the room. So I ask a lot of questions. I'm genuinely curious. And so my curiosity and not assuming has allowed me to have more success, because I ask those second and third level questions, because I don't want to assume it's a paper cut when it's a tourniquet, or vice versa.
100%. And let's dive into that, the genuine curiosity, because I think Dale Carnegie was big on it. I think
Mhm.
it is such an important part of actually relationships, if you ask me. I mean, I don't care if it's with your wife, your kids, a prospect, your boss, your subordinates, whatever. I think genuine curiosity is highly underrated. And I'd like to kind of dive into it a little deeper. How do you cultivate it? What's your kind of perspective on it? What do you tell people? How do you do it? It's one thing just to say it, be curious, but you know what? Most people only care about themselves. So how do you
Right.
get people out of that mindset and focused on being genuinely curious?
Yeah, like you said, most people are focused on themselves. So I think you've got to correlate how being genuinely curious in others can ultimately benefit yourself, right? And you want that to be, you want to hire people of good culture, right? If you see people who are all about themselves and don't really want to help others, um, in sales, those, culture is key, right? And so you want to hire well, but then once you hire, you do want to cultivate the culture of, we're gonna put our customers first. Like, we have 3 core values on my team. Um, Put the customer first. Character counts is the second one, and then best is a standard on our team, right? So I keep things in threes, and so, like, as a leader and people manager, you want to keep preaching the culture you expect from your team. And so being genuinely interested, I think, falls in that take care of your customer always category, right?
Love it.
And that's, you've got to you've got to keep preaching that. And when you see someone on your team who's maybe jumping and making it more transactional than you'd like to see as a leader, I think you've got to pull them aside, and you've got to remind them that, hey, look, you know we want to close business, we want to be successful, but there is an element here that you may be jumping over. And just I mean, there's a lot of different ways we could go with this, but I think ultimately is, like, you're the keeper of culture on your team, or your organization. You got to make sure you kind of keep that going.
I love that. So now, with that whole genuine curiosity, and let's dive into kind of the building rapport aspect.
Yeah.
You talk about it in the book. I think it's so important, and I think it's far more nuanced than it's. Of course, some people are naturally very good with people, and it's second nature for them building rapport. But for those people who, especially going back to those young salespeople, who are so eager, they're
Yeah.
so excited to just go close, close, close. So basically, they basically thinking everything's like Wall Street, and they just want money, 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 and close,
Right.
close, close. Um, in terms of building rapport, what is your advice to the young people, and your guidance on this is how you build rapport?
Yeah, I think first, go in with your pre-call planning, go in with the objectives you want to cover. So on a 3x5 note card, sometimes I wear scrubs a lot. I'm in medical sales, so I keep that in my pocket. And knowing what you want to accomplish and having that bullet pointed and keep with you, before you go in, will help you focus on relationship first, because you know what you're going to get. You're going to pull out that 3x5 card. You're going to look down on your notebook before you leave. Did you cover what you wanted to cover? So you can kind of go in there and think just about your customer, right? When you know what you want to accomplish. So I think that first few minutes with a customer, you'll notice if they want to go straight to business. I talk about in the book about pulling that conversation back just a touch, right? So for those that want to jump into the transactional conversation right away, say, hey, I know we're here to talk about this. Would you be open? I'd love to learn more about your story. Would you tell me a little bit more about you? I'm fascinated by that, right? Or, I read this on LinkedIn that you did this. Can you tell me a little bit more about, just, I'm curious, um, learning their story. Tell me about yourself. I know we're here to talk about this, but before we talk about this subject, could you tell me this about you? Those are all like basic things that I think every salesperson needs to just master.
Well, I think that's a really, really great point, because I think all too often a young person might confuse that for, trying to get very personal with the person, and, talk about you have a wife and kids, and, and start, okay, look, if that, when you ask them about themselves, they're like, oh, and they start diving into their kids, great. That's where they
Right.
want to take it. Then
Right.
fine. But if you ask them and they stick purely business and they tell you their business story, don't be like, well, let me tell you about my wife and kids.
Yes.
Like, what? Right.
Yes, yeah, that
So
that gets weird. Yeah, you really have to have that emotional intelligence, and it's learned over time. Hopefully, you have it as you're getting into sales, and your sales gut will tell you that was weird, right? And learn from it. And if you screw up, and don't beat yourself up too much, right? Like, don't do that on the next sales call.
100%. So now you talked about the pre-call planning, right?
Yeah.
So for you, what's kind of your process and advice that you give people in terms of preparing for, to call a prospect?
Yeah. I mean, I did it today, actually. I worked on a PowerPoint presentation. I like to get visuals down about the customers I'm working for. My manager, my director says, get all the facts. And so sometimes just creating a PowerPoint with the photos of the people you're going to be talking to, where they are within the organization, navigating that and looking at putting it on paper, I think makes it real to us. So really just spend that time, it's worth every penny by spending the pre-call plan, call it 15 to 30 minutes before you go in there, and create a visual of what you're about ready to walk into based off what you know. If you're calling on a purchaser for XYZ products, put that picture down there, try to figure out the organizational hierarchy, and just start trying to create an understanding of who you're calling on.
Love it. Now, a lot of young people, especially, but even some seasoned, more seasoned people, kind of struggle with confidence.
Mm.
So, uh, what is your take on that? What's your advice? How do they build up the confidence that they need in order to go in and just your take on confidence? Let me leave it at that.
Yeah. Well, we talk in chapter 4 about confidence, and one of my managers, Justin, was one of the best guys that could have best mentors that could have ever happened to me early on in my career. And so he would tell funny stories. He would always try to keep it light before we go into big meetings, and was a lot of fun, right? I've learned a lot about that from him. And so I've been on both sides of that continuum. I've either been overconfident or I've been underconfident. But I think for me, understanding my faith is the foundation for me, right? So I think when I know who I am, I live from who I am. I talk about identity in chapter 2 a little bit, where when we live from our identity, we're just much more confident in general, right? Knowing that we don't have anything to prove, that our identity is set, whether we have a good meeting and close the deal or not. So I'm very fortunate that my dad kind of preached that. And so I would encourage everybody to kind of think through their identity a little bit, right? But then also there's skills that are learned along the way. That skills builds confidence. And also I encourage people to take an inventory, right? Go back through your life. Like, did you make the high school basketball team? Did you accomplish things at an early age that you feel very proud of? Go write those down and create a list of all your wins. And I think living from your identity, building your win sheet, if you will, and then putting in that elite preparation every day really sets yourself up to handle the no's and the adversity that we get in sales. And then there's some other things, like I talk about some affirmation stuff, and some scripture memorization, things like that I think can help fortify your mind a little bit.
Yeah, I think the identity stuff is really important, and I think a lot of, again, younger people, but some older. But I think a lot of them, you're out to prove yourself, and that's part of life, right? You got to go and accomplish some things, and you're still, especially when you're young, you're trying to figure out what your identity is. Who am I? Am I a
Yeah.
guy for sales? Am I an artist? What am I? Everybody wants to be figure out who they are, right? As part of
Right.
the life's journey, as figuring out who you are. And so I think that adds an extra layer or level of challenge for a young sales professional to, one, be like, okay, I'm a sales guy. And now you've got to, there's all this old BS about salespeople being like, you're a used car salesman, you're just peddling your wares and you sell, whatever. So there's that. But then as you talk about it, and I think it's such an important topic of really being kind of comfortable and understanding who you are, your identity, and that it's not tied into your success necessarily. You're not successful because you closed that deal. That's not who you are.
Right.
You're Jon, and being like, yeah, I'm Jon, and knowing that you're Jon, whether you win the deal or not, right?
Yeah.
That you're loved, you're worthwhile, all these things that a kind of solid person should be.
Right.
You go into it in a really, really cool way that I think makes people think. I mean, it's worth, I think, people reading, and when they go through it and if they put the thought in, I think a lot of people will have a little bit of self-discovery there. So it's really well done.
Yeah, thank you. And I think, in sales, we're stack ranked. And so we become a number in our own mind. And I think as hyper competitive individuals, myself being right up there at the top of that, just stupid competitive, we forget who we are. And we think we're either number 1 out of 500 or we're number 500 out of 1, And so we've got to remind ourselves that, we're sons and daughters of the Most High God, right? I talk about that. And if faith's not for you, there's other things you can do that can kind of help with that as well. But understanding who you are, living from that, and realizing you're more than just a number sets you up to sell more confidently.
Yeah. No, and that's I think the beautiful thing about faith is, whether you're religious or not, it is such a powerful thing. We've seen it. It's been scientifically proven time and time again. If you believe you cannot do something, you're not going to do it. If you believe with absolute certainty that you can do it, you're going to do it. It's like, oh, can you walk from here to there? Yeah, I can walk from here to there. And it's just a given. So there's no challenge there. It's like the 5-minute mile used to be, you can't beat 5 minutes. Now you got high school kids blowing past 5-minute miles. You got high school kids doing 4-minute miles.
Crazy.
It's like, what? But as soon as people believed that it could be done, they saw it was done, it can be done. Okay, great. I believe I can do that with enough training. And the same goes for success in sales or your business or whatever the career is. If you see somebody doing it, which goes right back to the whole mentor thing, and they're like right there helping you, I can do that. I'm like, we see these people and like, they're not a genius. He's running this company. He's making a killing. He's not smarter than me.
Right.
So, he's not some genius that's like, we can't, we can't all be Elon Musk. We can't all be Albert Einsteins or Edisons. That is very true. We don't have it. Fine. Those are very far and few between. But you kind of lay all of that out in the book in such a great way. As people read it, I think all these things come together nicely, and it's just really well done.
Thanks, man. Yeah, it's the playbook that I've used to get where I am today. And it's the real talk, right? It's the mess ups, it's the mistakes, and it's also the things I've done well that I hope will help that next generation of sellers. And like you said, I think I've had people reach out to me and say, I've been in sales for 30 years or 20 years. And they say, I'm picking up things left and right from your book. And then the younger generation that's like, they're learning everything.
Love it. Well, can you tell people before we go here where they can pick up a copy and where they can find out more about you and the book?
Yeah. So Amazon.com, Relentless Sales, and you can pick up a copy on Amazon. And then my website's just my name, Jon, Jon Alwinson.com. And you can find some free resources, some free downloads on the website as well. There's some cool tools on there for you to download.
Fantastic. Well, Jon, excellent book. Everyone, highly recommend it. Go pick it up. Thanks for coming on the show today.
Matt, thank you so much for having me.
Pleasure.
Thanks for listening to the Cyber Business Podcast. We'll see you again next time, and be sure to click subscribe to get future episodes.